Hi everyone, my name is Apuraj Garakapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Abai.
Choose your next adventure.
Expected that even the greatest knight of Kalia would eventually appear as well. Wiking Kalia would surely not be pleased about that development. Patrick then asked Dwayne how many soldiers had arrived. Dwayne calmly replied that the total number was 201 men. Hearing that figure left both Patrick and Logan stunned. Logan remarked that this was nearly double the number of knights McLean currently possessed. Patrick immediately pointed out that integrating such a large group of warriors, including their elite knights, would cause serious complications. Managing them all could become extremely difficult. At that moment, Logan suddenly had an idea. He told Patrick that the situation might not be as troublesome as it first appeared. Patrick asked whether Logan already had a solution, and Logan began explaining his plan to him. Later that day, Logan summoned all the newly arrived knights to the training grounds of the McLean estate. Standing before the gathered soldiers, Logan introduced himself and assumed they already knew who he was. The crowd confirmed that they did. Among them stood a man who snorted impatiently. This was George A., the former commander of the Kalian Knight Order and an advanced knight. He seemed pleased that formal knight training was about to begin. Before leaving Kalia territory, George had already discussed this decision with his former lord. In his chambers, Wiking Kalia appeared unhappy about the situation. It was actually Kalia himself who suggested that Georgia leave and serve under McLean instead of continuing to follow a weakened master. However, Georgia remained loyal in his own way. He believed that by proving himself within McLean, he could repay his lord's grace and avoid disgracing the title of Kalia's Knight Commander. In his mind, he would rise to become an important figure within the McLean forces. Back in the present, Logan announced that this gathering marked the first training session for the newly reorganized McLean Knights. To begin, he said they would start with a simple and casual greeting used by the McLean Order. Hearing this left many of the Kalian Knights confused because they had no idea what to expect. What followed was something far from ordinary. The knights were forced to carry each other on their backs like pack animals before climbing the side of a mountain. When one knight finally reached the top, a McLean knight was already waiting there. As soon as he arrived, the McLean knight spat directly in his face. Georgia ended up collapsing onto the ground after completing the brutal climb. He stared upward in disbelief and wondered if these people were simply messing with him. However, when he looked around, he realized that everyone had gone through the same ordeal. That made him ask whether these bastards actually trained like this every single day. It suddenly became clear why people often said that even the mid-ranking knights of McLean's could threaten high-ranking knights elsewhere. After this brutal introduction, Logan calmly announced that since the greeting ceremony was finished, the next step would be learning the Iron Blood Sword, a mid-tier sword technique belonging to the McLean Knight Order. Logan explained that each pair of Kalian knights would be assigned a McLean knight as their instructor, and they were to treat that instructor as their personal master while training. Georgia immediately assumed that someone of his rank as an advanced knight would surely be trained directly by a noble. In his mind, this was a rare opportunity to improve his skills. When he turned around to greet the person assigned as his teacher, he introduced himself politely. Standing before him was Henderson, a high-ranking McLean knight who calmly said that he was pleased to meet George A. The unexpected assignment left Georgia momentarily stunned. Earlier, Logan had specifically called Henderson to speak with him privately. Logan told him that he should have talked with him sooner, which left Henderson confused and asking what Logan meant. Logan explained that he had heard Henderson became a high-ranking knight during the recent war. Henderson confirmed that it was true, but said he had simply been lucky. Logan replied that he was sorry for not noticing sooner and admitted the news caught him off guard. He said he had always expected 3 other people to reach that level first, most likely, referring to Eileen, Victor, and Ronan. Henderson shook his head and said it was nothing because he had believed the same thing himself. He pointed out that those 3 had managed to catch up to the 15 years of training he had undergone in just a few short years. In his opinion, all of them would eventually become high-ranking knights as well. Logan responded that even so, Henderson was still the first among them to reach that rank, and he should feel proud of it. Logan also mentioned that Henderson was highly respected among the knights, and that everyone had voted for him to become the next knight commander. Henderson, however, admitted he was not certain he deserved such a position. Logan then surprised him by posing a challenge. Considering everything they had just discussed, Logan asked Henderson who he believed should become the next Knight Commander between himself and George. Henderson clearly had not expected such a question. Meanwhile, George was currently undergoing intense training. After repeatedly practicing the new technique, he was nearly out of breath. Henderson praised him, saying it was impressive that George had progressed so far in only 10 days. George tightened his grip on his sword and thanked Sir Henderson, saying it was all because of Henderson's guidance. Henderson shook his head and said the credit belonged to George's hard work alone. George then asked Henderson why he treated him so kindly. Henderson replied that he was simply following orders. George pointed out that not long ago they had been enemies on the battlefield. Henderson explained that only about 30 knights in the order were originally from McLean. The rest had joined later, just like George had. Hearing that made George lower his gaze in embarrassment. He admitted that he felt ashamed because he had originally expected to receive a high position immediately after arriving. Henderson replied that such a possibility still existed. After all, George was an advanced knight and their lord valued talented individuals greatly. George then asked Henderson how he personally felt about the situation. The question caught Henderson off guard. George wondered whether Henderson truly had no objections. Henderson answered calmly that a knight simply follows orders and that his own opinions did not matter. As long as the Knights of McLean grew stronger, he did not care who held the position of command. He said this with a cheerful smile that made him seem almost saint-like. George opened his mouth as if to say something, but stopped himself at the last moment. Instead, George suddenly bowed deeply and declared that he, George, former commander of the Calia Knights, swore to follow Sir Henderson as his superior knight. Seeing this unexpected display left Henderson unsure how to respond. He awkwardly asked George what exactly he was doing. Watching this scene from a balcony above, Logan remarked that it seemed the knights from Calia would integrate into McLean's forces quite well. Logan then told his father that they had also found their new knight commander. Patrick agreed that Henderson was an excellent knight. However, Patrick admitted that he had always imagined Ronan becoming their next commander. Instead, Patrick explained that if Logan eventually inherited the house, it would make sense for Ronan to lead the army as his brother. Hearing that made Logan pause, because he had never really thought about inheriting the house. In that way, at that moment, Logan told Patrick that he intended for Ronan to inherit Patrick's title instead. Patrick reacted with shock and disbelief. He looked almost upset and demanded to know what Logan was talking about. Logan calmly explained that Ronan was perfectly qualified for the position. Patrick refused to accept that reasoning and argued that Logan had already done far too much for the McLean family. Logan then revealed that he was aiming for something far greater than simply leading the house. Patrick immediately asked what Logan meant by that, but Logan replied that he could not reveal his plans yet. He assured his father that Patrick would understand everything eventually, just like before. Logan said that when the time came, everything would become clear. Patrick still could not comprehend what Logan was planning. As they spoke, someone nearby was secretly listening to their conversation from behind a wall. Patrick continued questioning Logan, while the hidden listener clenched his fist tightly. That eavesdropper turned out to be Ronan, who now began wondering whether he might be standing in the way of his brother's future. Later, Patrick tells Logan that now that the issue with the Knights has been resolved, Logan should finally get some rest. Once again, however, Logan seems reluctant to follow that advice. Patrick insists that Logan should take a proper break and asks if he is really going to act as if nothing happened. Logan laughs and says that he is not pretending. Of course, with Logan, there is always a but, something Patrick clearly does not want to hear. Logan explains that there are still many problems that need to be addressed, so they should hold a meeting first. He promises that after the meeting is finished, he will finally. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pie grow naturally. Take a vacation. In the end, Patrick gives in once again, and a meeting is called. Later, inside the estate hall, Patrick grips the marble railing with one hand and announces that the first general meeting of House McLean will now begin. Logan begins by saying that since the war has ended, and their house has been elevated in rank, many new changes must be addressed. They will discuss each issue and slowly figure things out. Soon someone raises a hand. It is Clayton, who reports that he has made progress in the research direction Logan proposed earlier. Because of this progress, Clayton says they will require additional funding to continue their work. Next, Hammer speaks up, explaining that the workshop needs far more workers if they want to increase crossbow production. He says they need at least 3 times as many craftsmen as they currently have. Dwayne then loudly adds that the administration office desperately needs more personnel because they can no longer keep up with the paperwork. Patrick listens and realizes that all of these requests involve important decisions. Logan begins thinking through the matters one by one. First is Clayton's research, which concerns the Crownet project and the idea Logan proposed about infusing ordinary metal with magic. Once that research is completed, they may eventually be able to mass-produce magical artifacts. The second issue is Hammer's workshop. Their crossbows have already become famous throughout the kingdom, which means they must prepare to manufacture them in much larger quantities. However, with their current workforce, such production would be impossible. To solve that problem, they will need to recruit more dwarves to work in their forges. Logan also reflects on how their territories have expanded dramatically after their recent victories and rewards. They now control around 20 castles, which means they require far more people to manage everything. Logan asks if anyone else has requests. At that moment, he notices another hand beginning to rise. It is Ronyan's hand. Ronyan wants to speak, but the words seem stuck in his throat. Logan encourages him to speak freely. Ronyan finally explains that, because of their growing reputation, many merchants and refugees have started entering their lands. However, this growth has also brought problems, such as theft and burglaries. Several nobles nod in agreement and mention that their soldiers have already been struggling to deal with these incidents. Ronyan then proposes a bold solution. Instead of having regular soldiers handle public security, they could establish a special security force dedicated solely to maintaining order. This force could be led by older soldiers and retired knights, allowing experienced warriors to oversee local safety. The suggestion surprises everyone in the room, including Logan. Ronyan explains that this policy change could significantly improve their ability to maintain order throughout their territories. Logan immediately realizes that Ronyan has independently come up with a system similar to the security structures used in large cities within the Empire. Logan feels proud of his brother and tells him that it is an excellent idea, and that they will implement it. He instructs Ronyan to take charge of the project, and even suggests that Ronyan begin by governing one of their castles to establish the system. Ronyan initially looks excited and says he will do his best, but only a moment later his enthusiasm fades. Logan notices the sudden change in Ronyan's mood and wonders why he looks so down. Seeing Ronyan staring at the floor, Logan decides that he will have to talk to him privately. Later, Logan then shifts the discussion to administrative matters. Recruiting more staff will not be difficult, but he asks Dwayne exactly how many people they need. Dwayne estimates that around 30 additional officials will be required. Philip adds that these new officials must be capable of starting work immediately. Dwayne then raises another suggestion. Since the people gathered in the room are those Logan trusts most, he proposes that they choose the individuals who will govern each castle from among themselves. Hearing this, Patrick quickly understands what Dwayne means. Dwayne is suggesting that the castellans for the new castles be appointed immediately. Patrick asks Dwayne if he would like to nominate someone. Dwayne jokingly suggests himself, which makes Patrick laugh and say, of course, he can stay and oversee the administration. Another person raises his hand. Damien proposes an additional idea. They could allow nominations for castellans, but they should first establish clear guidelines. Damien suggests that knights be sent first to the newly acquired territories in Kelia and Terran. Logan and Patrick both wonder why that would be necessary. Damien explains that newly conquered territories, especially ones that once opposed them, will likely resist their authority at first. Therefore, assigning knights as castellans would help stabilize those regions. According to Damien, intermediate-ranked knights should be sufficient for that task. Patrick praises Damien's proposal and says they will take the suggestion into account. Logan listens quietly while remembering Damien's role in his previous life. Back then, Damien was the brilliant strategist of the Freedom Fighters. Now he simply looks pleased that his idea has been accepted. The contrast between this life and Logan's past memories feels striking. Logan decides that he will eventually give Damien a more important responsibility. Patrick then announces that they will begin selecting castellans according to Damien's idea, so everyone should start suggesting candidates. Soon, the room fills with raised hands as everyone eagerly nominates people. Patrick laughs at the enthusiasm and remarks that everyone seems eager for responsibility. Logan jokingly says that they might as well consider themselves proto-nobles at this point. Patrick looks proudly at the group of loyal people surrounding him. Only 3 years ago, they controlled a single castle. Yet now, they oversee an entire network of territories. Patrick can hardly believe how much they have grown. He places a hand on Logan's shoulder and tells him that all of this success exists thanks to him. Logan looks toward his father and smiles. It is clear that Patrick feels incredibly proud of his son, and Logan cannot help feeling proud of what they have built together. The scene then shifts to the royal palace. Archduke Felix Esperanza is walking through the quiet corridors of the palace when he encounters one of the guards. The guard informs him that the king is already aware of his arrival and invites him inside. With a respectful bow, Felix enters the king's chamber. Inside, he sees King Roger seated at his desk, writing something carefully. From the look of it, the young king has been busy working. However, as Felix observes him more closely, something else catches his attention. The king's cheeks are slightly red. It appears he has been drinking alcohol. Felix asks him if he is really drinking this early in the day. The king laughs it off and jokes that the strict sword duke is already chasing after him. He lifts the glass in his hand and tells Felix that he should relax a little, because the drink is only meant to calm his nerves. Felix asks what nerves he is referring to. The king replies that he has been thinking about his brothers who died during the Civil War and is drinking to commemorate the past. He explains that he spent most of his life living in his brother's shadows, constantly struggling just to survive. Now that everything is over and he has finally gained his freedom, he feels like he deserves to celebrate at least a little. Felix clearly wants to lecture him about his behavior, but before he can say anything, the king asks why Felix came to see him in the first place. Just then, someone knocks on the door. A guard announces that he has brought what the king requested. Felix turns toward the door and sees the king suddenly looking very pleased. Moments later, several maids enter the room. They are all dressed elegantly and carry trays of food, as if they are preparing a feast. From the looks of it, they might not have been brought here only to serve food either. Felix looks around the room and asks what exactly is going on. At that moment, a butler steps forward and pours another drink into the king's glass. The king mentions that Felix probably has not seen this man before. He explains that the man previously worked in the palace and was known for being very good at reading people. Because of that talent, the king decided to appoint him as his new chamberlain. The man politely bows toward Felix and greets him respectfully before introducing himself as Cleo. Seeing this development leaves Felix looking genuinely unsettled. As he watches the scene unfold, a troubling thought crosses his mind. What exactly is happening to the young king of Grandia? The scene then shifts to the McLean administrative office. Dwayne is seated behind his desk while several administrators sit around a long table, carefully reviewing stacks of documents. Some of them glance toward Dwayne as the work continues. Fabian approaches and hands him a bundle of papers. Dwayne thanks him and praises the quality of his work. The documents appear to concern the harvest report from Castle Tessren and the construction of the defensive wall around the town, matters Dwayne had already been expecting. Despite the smooth workflow, the other administrators clearly seem uncomfortable with Fabian's presence. Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps Amazing Apai grow naturally. Another administrator suddenly interrupts and asks Dwayne to wait a moment. He points out a small error in the budget calculations and suggests using Rohiter's cross-checking method to prevent similar mistakes in the future. Unfortunately, Dwayne admits that he has never even heard of such a method. Lockman laughs and says he will gladly teach it to him. Dwayne agrees and once again praises both Fabian and Lockman, saying that even though they are newcomers, they have already helped him tremendously. Lockman politely thanks him and says they simply want to serve their lord well for giving them this opportunity. Fabian adds that Dwayne should not hesitate to ask if he ever needs assistance. These two men are demi-barons, former administrators who once served the houses of Douglas and Valtreman. The original McLean administrators watched this interaction with obvious displeasure. Later that evening, inside a tavern, one of those administrators slams his mug of beer onto the table in frustration. The three of them sit together, complaining about the situation. One of them asks why they had to hire nobles to assist them in the first place. As commoners, it now feels like they will have to bow their heads to those nobles from now on. Another man replies that this is probably exactly what will happen. One of them remembers how excited they were during the meeting a month earlier when they heard new staff would be hired. They had received hundreds of applications, and even though the workload was exhausting, they were happy about the help. What puzzled them most was that almost all the applicants turned out to be nobles. One man explains that the war devastated their lands, forcing many noble administrators to seek employment elsewhere. The others say they already knew that. However, the worst part, according to them, is watching Dwayne handle those nobles every day. Even though they are nobles, they still have to work under Dwayne's authority. One of them quietly admits that while Dwayne never complains, it must be extremely difficult for him. Sometime later, Dwayne is summoned to Logan's office. Standing before Logan, he reports that the newly hired administrators are doing excellent work. In fact, he even admits that Lotman and Fabian might be more capable than he is. Logan asks if he truly believes that. Dwayne lowers his gaze, clearly ashamed, and says that he honestly does. Logan simply brushes the comment aside and thanks Dwayne for everything he has done, preparing to dismiss him. However, Dwayne does not leave. Instead, he stands there silently staring at the floor. After a moment, he gathers his courage and asks Logan if he may say something. Logan tells him to go ahead, but Dwayne struggles to speak. With a tear or perhaps sweat running down from the corner of his eye, Dwayne finally says what has been weighing on him. He tells Logan that he wants to retire. The words completely shock Logan. He jumps up from his chair and almost shouts, asking why Dwayne would even consider such a thing. Dwayne explains that ever since Sir Hinckley stepped down from his position, he began thinking about his own situation. Still looking down, he quietly says that perhaps it is time for him to step aside as well. Logan immediately argues that Hinckley did not truly retire. He now trains the new soldiers, but Dwayne replies that this is not the same situation. Recently, he has begun feeling that his usefulness has run its course. Logan starts sweating in confusion and asks what he means by that. Dwayne explains that the new administrators are clearly more capable than he is. From an organizational standpoint, having a commoner placed above nobles of greater scale may create tension. He apologizes to Logan for causing trouble. Logan quickly says that the real mistake was his own for failing to notice how Dwayne felt. He asks him to pause and think things over carefully before making such a decision. Dwayne remains uncertain, unable to say anything more. Several seconds pass in silence, with Dwayne thinking deeply while Dwayne keeps staring at the floor. Suddenly, Logan shouts as an idea strikes him. He announces that the solution is simple. Dwayne will become a noble himself. That way, the problem disappears entirely. Dwayne is stunned by the suggestion. Logan walks over and places an arm around his shoulders, explaining that both he and Patrick had been careless. The loyal workers who stood beside them throughout the war deserved proper rewards, and failing to recognize that was their mistake. Dwayne points out that Logan already used all the noble titles the king granted him. Logan laughs and replies that if he asks King Roger for a few more baron titles, the king will surely agree. Dwayne hesitates and says that doing something like that might look like abusing his authority. Logan dismisses the concern and says it is perfectly fine. He is willing to take the blame himself if it means properly rewarding the loyal people who fought beside him. Later, the scene shifts back to the royal palace. Felix stands outside a door, thinking about the strange conversation he just had with the king. Earlier, when he was inside the room, His Majesty tried to justify his drinking by saying it was part of a ceremony. According to the king, it was the final rite of the 2-7-fold ceremony, and Felix should allow him this indulgence. Felix immediately questioned that explanation. He reminded the king that the 2-7-fold ceremony exists to honor the 9-fold heavens, with 3 days devoted to each god in remembrance of the dead. Felix could not understand how drinking excessively in the middle of such a solemn ritual could possibly be considered part of the rite. The king cut him off before he could continue, saying that Felix worried far too much and that he was perfectly capable of controlling himself. Hearing that left Felix speechless, He closed his mouth, clenched his fist, and ultimately bowed his head to apologize. The king then glanced down at the drink in his hand and remarked that they had become sidetracked. He asked Felix why he had come to see him in the first place. Felix explained that he wanted to discuss what their next move should be regarding House Wolves. The king lifted his glass again, while Cleo watched him with an unusual expression. The king replied that the matter would be addressed soon. In his opinion, although House Wolves had wronged him, demoting them and confiscating half their lands should already be sufficient punishment. Felix could not ignore the feeling that Cleo was influencing the king's decisions more than expected. Now, walking through the palace halls, Felix tries to convince himself that the king simply needs time. Roger has endured tremendous loss, and perhaps he only needs a chance to grieve before returning to his normal self. At least, that is what Felix wants to believe. At that moment, someone approaches him with urgent news. A servant informs Felix that a communication from the Crown Channel has arrived. Felix asks why such a message is being brought to him instead of the king. The man explains that the message concerns His Majesty. Felix immediately understands the situation and orders the message to be brought to him. Meanwhile, at the Mechlin estate, Logan activates one of the magical communication channels to speak with the king. He expects to greet King Roger, but instead, Felix appears on the other end of the connection. Felix remarks that it has been a while since they last spoke, and his tone clearly shows that he is not pleased. He tells Logan that the king is currently occupied with other matters and that Logan should speak with him instead. Logan asks what is going on. Felix, visibly irritated, places a hand on his forehead and mutters that nothing has happened, at least not yet. Logan becomes confused and asks what he means by that. Felix dismisses the question and tells Logan not to worry about it. Instead, he asks Logan why he initiated the communication. Logan explains that his request is simple. He briefly describes the situation and tells Felix that he only needs a title, not land, or additional rewards. Felix listens and confirms that Logan is asking only for the noble title and nothing else. Logan says that is correct. Felix replies that he will speak with the king on Logan's behalf, but he warns Logan to remember something important. This will be the last noble title Logan will be allowed to grant. Logan acknowledges the condition and agrees. The communication then ends. After the connection closes, Logan takes a deep breath and relaxes. However, he cannot stop thinking about Felix's strange behavior. Felix was clearly angry, but something about him felt different than usual. He even ended the conversation abruptly without saying goodbye. Logan cannot shake the feeling that something serious must have happened in the palace. Before he can think about it further, the door bursts. Logan asks Logan to open and Dwayne rushes inside with tears in his eyes. Overcome with emotion, he runs straight toward Logan and hugs him tightly, thanking him again and again for what he has done. Logan, on the other hand, looks completely overwhelmed and tries to pry Dwayne off him. Dwayne declares that he will serve House McLean until his very last breath, while Logan repeatedly yells at him to get off from him. Later that night, another scene unfolds. A young woman dressed in a white gown approaches a carriage while her escort knight nervously asks her to wait. He looks worried and asks if she is truly leaving, saying that if something goes wrong, he might be blamed for it. The woman calmly enters the carriage and tells him it cannot be helped. After the war, their house was ruined, and even though her father knelt in the royal palace for 4 days begging for mercy, it changed nothing. Still, she insists that this is not the end. She says she still has one lifeline remaining. The woman reveals herself to be Rihanna of House Wolves, Logan's former finance who betrayed him. The next morning, at the McLean estate, Logan stands before a group of administrators while reading from a formal scroll. The document describes someone who has greatly contributed to the success of House McLean. Of course, the person being praised is Dwayne. Logan continues reading that for his dedication and loyal service, Dwayne is officially awarded the noble title of Baron with the decree signed by His Majesty Roger von Grandia himself. As soon as Logan finishes reading, the entire room erupts with excitement. The administrators rush forward to congratulate Dwayne, many of them hugging him. Overwhelmed with emotion, Dwayne's eyes fill with tears as he repeatedly tries to thank Logan, but struggles to get the words out. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pie grow naturally. Lockman steps forward next to congratulate him as well, while Fabian stands behind him, smiling warmly. Dwayne looks both relieved and deeply grateful. Soon, the entire room begins cheering for him. Watching the celebration, Fabian quietly remarks that in this house even commoners can rise to nobility through loyalty and ability alone. Looking at Logan with calm pride, Fabian tells Lockman that choosing to come to McLean was clearly the right decision. Lockman nods in agreement. Later that day, a sensory aptitude test is being held for new recruits. Logan watches the event and notes that not only administrators, but also many soldiers have applied to join their forces. Thanks to Eileen's suggestion, they have also begun accepting female applicants, which has made the recruitment process much more lively. Hinckley stands beside Logan and explains that since they started using the test, Logan suggested, many new soldiers have begun awakening their internal force. He says he hopes they will discover many talented recruits today. Logan points towards several candidates and remarks that he can already sense a faint trace of force in some of them. Hinckley follows his gaze and points toward a particular girl, asking if Logan is referring to her. Both of them had noticed the same person, which surprises Logan. He cannot believe that Hinckley can also sense such a weak internal force that is not even being outwardly displayed. Logan had always believed he was the only one capable of detecting something so subtle. Hinckley explains that after losing his own force, his senses have become much sharper. Because of that heightened sensitivity, he can now detect the potential in others more clearly. He says that this role suits him well, because he can now identify who will eventually become a knight. Logan quietly reflects on Hinckley's words. Becoming more sensitive to force after losing it is something Logan has never heard of before, not even in his previous life. Then a realization strikes him. It is extremely rare for a knight to survive losing their force. Yet Hinckley managed to do exactly that. Logan suddenly remembers his own situation. In his previous life, he died, which means his force was completely destroyed at that time. Yet after regressing into this life, he gained extraordinary senses that surpass normal perception. If he could truly understand how this phenomenon worked, he might even awaken Aura sooner than expected. While thinking about this revelation, Logan suddenly feels a sharp pain in his head. Hinckley notices the change in his expression and asks if he is all right. Logan quickly replies that he is fine, and claims he only felt slightly dizzy. He tells Hinckley that he will head out for a moment. Hinckley says he will send him the full report from the recruitment test later. Logan immediately runs into the forest. Watching him leave, Hinckley wonders if Logan is feeling unwell, but he notices that Logan's force feels stronger than ever. Meanwhile, Logan continues running deeper into the woods, thinking he must find an isolated place where he can attempt to activate his force. However, his plans are suddenly interrupted. He runs straight into Patrick, who asks why he is in such a hurry. Logan explains that he was heading out to train. Patrick asks if he plans to train alone. At that moment, Eileen also appears running toward them from the forest. Patrick then asks if she is doing the same thing as Logan. Logan asks Eileen, what is going on? Eileen reports that among the new female recruits, there are several promising candidates. Logan asks if she means the tall girl they noticed earlier. Eileen confirms that she does and says there are others as well. Patrick watches the two of them talk about work and suddenly sighs in annoyance. He asks if they are always like this. Both Logan and Eileen look at him in confusion, and Logan asks what he means. Patrick bluntly explains that they are a young couple who constantly talk about work. Then he asks them directly when they plan to get married. Later, beside a quiet river, Logan sits alone with Lux resting near him. It seems he ran away from that awkward conversation. He assumes that Eileen must be angry again, but suddenly she appears behind him. To his surprise, she does not look angry at all, though she is clearly blushing. Logan immediately apologizes and says he embarrassed himself earlier. Eileen smiles softly and tells him it is fine because she was also surprised, but at least she did not run away like he did. Logan apologizes again, but Eileen says she did not come here for an apology. That statement surprises him. Then she asks him directly when they will get married. She says they should at least decide on a date so that situations like earlier will not happen again. Logan blushes intensely. Then Eileen asks an even more direct question whether he actually does not want to marry her. Hearing that makes Logan panic, sweating nervously. He loudly insists that this is not the case at all. Realizing how he sounded, he quickly calms down and apologizes again. Eileen sighs with relief and admits she briefly thought her fiancé had rejected her. She brushes her hair aside while Logan struggles to find the right words. Finally, he says that Eileen is simply too good for him, and that is why he worries their marriage might not work. Eileen asks why he believes that. Logan fidgets awkwardly and explains that there is far too much work waiting for him. He will likely be busy for at least the next 5 or 6 years, which means he might become a terrible husband. He apologizes sincerely. Eileen listens quietly before answering. Once again, she surprises him. She says that if Logan will be so busy, then he will need someone beside him to stabilize everything. While Logan focuses on his responsibilities, someone must maintain the household and keep everything running smoothly. Logan argues that such a life would be unfair to her, but Eileen gently asks why. She reaches out and places her hand on his cheek. She tells him that a man who understands his own flaws can still become a wonderful husband. If all his hard work is meant to protect their house and people, then it only means she will be busy as well as both his knight and his wife. Logan stares at her completely flustered. Slowly he places his hand over hers and admits that he had been thinking about everything the wrong way. He calls himself a fool for not realizing it sooner. Then Logan leans forward and kisses Eileen. Their reflection shimmers together in the clear water of the river, as he finally tells her that he wants to marry her. Meanwhile, Rihanna finally arrives at her destination. Just as we expected, she has reached the McLean estate, and she quietly observes how much the place has changed since the last time she was there. The knight escorting her suggests that they should return instead, reminding her that she already annulled her engagement with Logan. However, Rihanna calmly says that she did not come here for Logan in the first place. She tells her knight not to worry and confidently claims that Logan could never have forgotten her. While the McLeans were busy reorganizing their territories after the war, a new rumor had begun spreading throughout the capital, Grand. The rumor said that the runaway count, Karen Wolves, had returned. He was the noble who vanished during the battle, yet now he had disgracefully returned and was kneeling before the crown. In the royal palace, he shouted desperately, begging the king to listen to his plea. Karen offered to surrender all the remaining property of his house, saying that he only wished to repent for his past mistakes. In return, he begged for only one thing, his life to be spared. After kneeling there for 4 days, the king finally delivered his judgment. An envoy read the royal decree aloud, announcing that the king would accept the proposal made by House Wolves. At first, Karen felt relief, but the decree continued with conditions he never expected. His house would be demoted to a Roman 6 county, restricted to a single town, and all other territories would be surrendered to the crown. Even so, House Wolves managed to survive. Back in the present at the McLean estate, Rena asks her knight Rockfern what he thinks about her appearance. Wearing a black and white dress, she asks whether she looks like someone going through difficult times. Rockfern answers that she looks perfect, but he hesitates and reminds her that Logan now has a fiancé. He asks whether her plan will really work. Rena calmly replies that being engaged does not make a man blind, making it obvious that she is talking about Logan. She confidently explains that Logan followed her around ever since they were children. Even when he proudly ended their engagement, she believes he could not hide his sadness. Otherwise, she asks, why would he have fought so fiercely just to obtain 3 million gold? In her mind, that money was desperately needed. She reminds herself that her father already did everything possible to preserve their family's survival, so now she must do what she can to restore their house. Soon, footsteps approach the room. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Appy. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.